Global Health SIG. This town hall is something that our SIG implemented a year and change ago. We try to have a town hall once a quarter, where we bring in members to talk about their work out in the field or around the corner, whatever communities worldwide that they're working with, and try to draw lessons from their work and figure out answers to things together. It's also an opportunity to get announcements and sort of current events that are going on with our SIG, but tonight is super special because we get to get the whole story. And so this town hall is the continuation of the Global Health SIG's 40th anniversary. The special interest group has been around in some way, shape, or form for 40 years. And we recognized a lot of that history and many of the pillars in this SIG community and academy community and global health community at that time, but never enough time to have all of the conversations and ask all of the questions and understand what lessons can be applied today. So this town hall really caps off the Global Health SIG's 40th anniversary celebrations and is part of the Global Health SIG History Project, which is being led by Kathy Clark, who is one of our board members, and who has really been the maestro of tonight. And so we await her arrival here, but they are working, Kathy and her team are working to document the people and the events that are involved in how this SIG was founded and how it grew and continues to grow over the last 40 years. So our guests tonight are founders and past leaders in the SIG, and they include, and if you give us a wave, Karin Schumacher. Thanks, Karin. Ronnie Leavitt. Hey, Ronnie. Jill Black. Hey. Celia Pechak and Jenny Audette. Um, Thank you all for being here. This is such a powerhouse group, and I can't wait to hear what this conversation brings. You guys are truly the OGs of this group. That's Kathy's words, not mine. And your stories are super important to capture and share with a wider audience. So we would also like to share that all five of our panelists tonight have also been recipients of our SIG's highest honor, which is the Ronnie Leavitt Award for Social Responsibility and Global Health. And so we honor them in a number of ways. Um, so to the group, the goal for the town hall is for the stories you've shared with Kathy to be shared with a wider audience. And so we would like to start with just some background questions, maybe having each of you introduce yourselves, maybe your hometown, how long you've been a PT, how you decided on your path in global health. So, Karin, would you start us off?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say welcome to everybody. I'm very glad to be here. It's exciting to see the global health SIG in its current state. I didn't ever imagine it 40 years ago like that. Basically, I was born in New York City. I had three siblings, and at age 4, my father moved us all up to Burlington, Vermont, because he loved the outdoors. But more importantly, he had been a doctor in New York City, and he was appointed to be the very first neurologist to practice in the state of Vermont. That tells you how old I am. Um, 1950, we moved up to Vermont. And I grew up there, had a wonderful growing up, didn't really know what I wanted to do. In high school, I was very, very motivated and inspired by JFK, John F. Kennedy. And the minute he mentioned the Peace Corps in his speeches, I was all in. That was my first short-term goal. And so I went to the University of Vermont for college, majoring in biology, and went right into the Peace Corps afterwards. Spent 2 years in Cebu City, Philippines, where I taught science and biology. And the second year, I became involved. I had noticed over the first year there was a lot of children, older children, with cleft palate and cleft lip. And unfortunately, they were growing up with it. And of course, many of them were ashamed of their face. They didn't want to go to school. The older ones, especially teenage girls, were totally unmarriageable. So I was able to start this group that we named Medical Assistance Cooperative with the cooperation and the teamwork of local Filipino communities, the doctors in the hospital, and Peace Corps volunteers who were scattered around the islands who could identify and bring these children into the big city. That was pretty successful. We probably operated on about 30 to 35 kids that year. Um, and when I left, I knew that by then I knew that I wanted to do physical therapy with children. I had just really become passionate about that. So I came back, applied to schools, and ended up at Northwestern University in 1972. Got a second bachelor's there because there were no master's programs or DPT programs then. But by the time I finished all my clinicals, I had switched from pediatrics to adult neuro, having worked in the rehab unit at Michael Reese Hospital. And so adult neuro became sort of my focus for much of my career. I stayed in Chicago for about 7 years, then moved to Boston for another 7 years. And during that time, I kept I didn't keep in touch with everyone in the Philippines, but my heart really and my professional heart ached for some more experience overseas to try to do some work with disability overseas. And so I ended up going to public health school because I felt that that was a broader vision, a broader arena to practice physical therapy. I went to the University of Michigan and received a master's in public health in 1985, focusing on health behavior and health education. And I felt the two of them, PT and public health, really dovetailed in that area. Now, um, during that time, as I was so eager to work overseas again, I was a very active member of the APTA. I was active on committees in Illinois and in and in Massachusetts. And I read the progress report, diligently every month. And I had been on committees and that kind of thing. And in 1983, APTA had a very in-depth, 2 or 3 page in-depth interview with Elizabeth McKay, who was the current um, executive secretary of the WCPT. And I had been introduced to WCPT by Sally Adelsberg at Northwestern and Ruth Wood, who'd both been at Northwestern. And I was very interested in it. And when I read this interview, I have to say now, and I reread it before tonight so I could sort of refresh my memory, I really agreed with about 80% of what she said. But there was one part that really bothered me in the sense that she talked about WCPT being an organization of um, that comprised groups of physical therapists who were organized within a country. If there was an organized PT organization, they could apply and be members. But my concern was with the lesser developed parts of the world. And I wrote a letter back expressing my concern that I thought WCPT could be broader. She misinterpreted my complaint and thought that I said something in my oh, by the way, my letter was then printed the following 6 months later in Progress Report, and it it spurred her to respond again. So her response to me was then published, and I took offense because she thought she misinterpreted something I had said. I had said I wasn't 100% familiar with everything WCPT did. She thought I was saying I was not familiar with APTA. So she made a remark like, well, you better get active with the APTA if you want to change anything. So, of course, I wrote back. I said, this is it. I wrote back and, really, I love the WCPT. I have to say, I've been supportive of it my whole career. I give a donation every year with my PT renewal, APTA renewal, and they do wonderful things. But I was just feeling like, oh my God, she just said that about me. I need to respond. So I wrote in the fall of 84, I wrote a letter to Progress Report and said, hey, physical therapists all over the country, if you're interested in anything like cross cultural or um, international work, contact me and we'll just organize a little meeting next summer at APTA conference in New Orleans. So sure enough, people, a couple people wrote me, but I didn't really know how many people would actually come. So actually, I think I'm in the wrong order, Kai. I was not supposed to get into this till later. I was supposed to
You're
tell you
reaching
about my.
a good page turn though. So
Okay,
maybe
so I
maybe
would
we'll
just say,
hear, yeah, let's hear
well,
from our other panelists just so we all know who
okay,
we're talking
yeah,
to. And then
yeah,
you're right at the starting point of the SIG.
right,
So we'll come back
right,
to the history too. So that's a
okay.
perfect stopper. Um, where am I going next? Ronnie.
Well, I learned new things about you, Karin, that I never knew. And the
Okay,
young people on, if there are any young people on this call, um, people like Ruth Wood and Sally were,
yeah,
they were the real movers and shakers of the APTA 50 years ago.
yeah, yeah,
So I
right.
live in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, which is in the western part of the state, not Boston. But I was born and raised in New York, which you probably can figure out from my New York accent, which I still have. And I grew up in an middle class community in New York where there were a lot of Jews and Italians probably, but no blacks, no Hispanics, nothing like that. At that time, it was even harder than it is now to find really mixed neighborhoods, which still is a tremendous challenge. And I I didn't realize it, but I led a sheltered, privileged life. And one of the things that's important in my story is an understanding of my privilege, which came much later on as I looked more into racism and understood racism and all of the other isms that I never had to face. And actually, now it was my mother used to say, "Oh, there's so much anti-Semitism in the world," and I said, "Oh no, you don't know what you're talking about." And of course, that has my mother is no longer
Right.
here, but that has come
Yeah.
back to bite me. Or my first job out of PT school, I graduated in '68. Since we're telling our age, Karin and I are just about the same age. I just had my birthday, 79.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And my first job was Harlem Hospital, which really was a big change, being the only white person or one of the very few white people in the hospital. But I was very comfortable. It really didn't bother me at all to be one of the few white people. I don't know why, but I enjoyed very much learning about a different culture and having patients and peers that were from mostly Black and American at that point. Then I was married to a orthopedist. Eventually, he was a resident when I was working at Harlem, and when he graduated, we went on a backpacking trip around the world, mostly lesser resource countries, and I really got to see what poverty was. Made Harlem not look that poor, which is pretty incredible at that time. And that further piqued my interest in international health and other cultures. And when I came back, I pursued also a Master of Public Health in New York City, where he was doing a residency. I did do a PhD later when I was at University of Connecticut, where I spent most of my professional life and really could delve into the topics that interested me because I was the outsider in the department. I was the only one that didn't have PT or orthopedic or neurology advanced degrees. I had had my public health degree, which I think got me the job at UConn at that time. PhDs were not very prevalent among faculty. But when I was there, I went for a medical anthropology PhD, not PT, not orthopedics and not neuro. And my dissertation was internationally focused and was culturally focused. It was health beliefs and behaviors of families with disabled children in rural Jamaica. And I chose Jamaica because it was close enough for me to go back and forth without spending thousands of dollars. Because in theory, they spoke English, although I must say many of my patients spoke Patois as their primary language. And because I thought it was a moderately developed country, or it was a moderately middle income country, and I thought they would likely have some programs for people with disabilities, only to find out that that certainly wasn't true. People with disabilities really didn't have any or very, very few programs. I did get involved with the one that existed for children, and those were my subjects. So I taught at UConn some neuro PT for adults and children, but my main focus was socio-political, social science, and public health, of course, which none of the students valued. But I kept telling them it was going to be very important. And I think that's my introduction to me. I I guess we'll get into this later, but I've been retired also for a while. But the key point for me, which I will go into later, is how you can remain socially responsible and an active participant in the political social life that we need to continue to be active in.
So much
I
to
see
talk about,
Kathy
Ronnie.
made it.
Thank you so much. I just want to hand the microphone over to
To
Kat.
Kathy. Hi, Kathy. We figured you were
Um,
having trouble.
we've had a couple of people with issues logging in from outside the US. So Jenny, Kathy, thank you for hanging in there and making it work. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to see all of you here. And I heard Karen and Ronnie, and let's just continue. And I think Jill, you're next.
All right. Well, thank you. This is exciting, and it's great to hear Karen and Ronnie your stories. I'm learning things I didn't know. I am a graduate of the University of Delaware in 1987. I got my BS in physical therapy at that time, and it was a few years after PT school that I had an opportunity unrelated to physical therapy that I stepped into, and it was to take a bunch of kids down to Acapulco, Mexico. There was a sister church in Acapulco, Mexico that was relatively affluent, but they were needing service projects. They had teams coming in that summer to pour concrete and cement. So I was a part of this concrete team helping the students, get all these things going. And as I got to know some of the folks down there in Acapulco connected to the local church, they shared that they were sending their own medical team out from their Acapulcan church out to more rural areas outside of Acapulco where they had daughter churches scattered about. And they had a nurse and a physician and a dentist, and they wanted, what's physical therapy? And so I explained a little bit. And then they said, well, why don't you stay? You would just have to change your ticket and just stay 2 more weeks and you can come with us. And so I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I'll change my ticket. If I get the ticket changed, I'm in. We got the ticket changed. Well, my next big challenge was that I realized that when I was there with my team from the United States, the folks we were working with were bilingual, and so they're speaking English and not Spanish. I took German in high school, had no Spanish, and as soon as my folks that were the kids on the team left, everything went into Spanish, and so I got my first dive into that, and I just was fascinated by getting to know a new culture, getting to know folks, getting to see them in their professional realms, and traveling out to villages and working alongside of them. Developed relationships. There's a doctor and his wife was a nurse that's out there in Ometepec. And after being there for 2 weeks and just really getting to see what their hospital there was like, and that element. And there was no physical therapy at the time. Over the time I was doing this, I went back and forth for 12 years. They developed the Mexican Physiotherapy Association branched out into that. And actually one of the patients that I had seen, a young girl, she went on to become a physical therapist and is in that community working. So it was just a really, really great, I mean, they're my family, right? And going back and forth like that was just really awesome. I came, and as I started to do that, I really felt at a loss to know how to do this well. So I cold called one Dr. Ronnie Leavitt one day. And I said, Ronnie Leavitt, you don't know me, but I read your book about Jamaica and the children with disabilities, and I need help because I don't quite know what I'm doing. And I have to just say, and I'll leave it at this, but Ronnie just took me under her wing, and I was just so moved by how she was so open and so willing to support me and encourage me. And it was just such an encouragement. She had me, and then I guess I should finish this piece. I then moved into getting my doctorate. I wanted to do an EDD to be able to move into academia. And so I thought I would do curriculum instruction. And I thought, how can I roll that into cultural competency as we help ourselves? And that was the buzzword at the time. And Ronnie was the guru of that buzzword as far as I knew. And so I'm coming alongside of her, learning all of that. Now, unlike Ronnie, when it came time to actually think about the research I wanted to do, it felt too daunting to make the trips back and forth to Mexico and do research there. And another colleague of mine said, path of least resistance, pick something close to home in your backyard. So I picked a homeless shelter in Philadelphia that Thomas Jefferson was interfacing with. And that's where my doctoral work was, which then led to some of the pro bono work that I've been doing in my backyard in Widener. So it's kind of full circle. When I couldn't go overseas anymore, I found, hey, there's work here too. So that's kind of that piece of it. But Ronnie ended up being the one to say, Jill, you need to present at CSM. Here, we're putting you on this panel. And the next thing you know, she's guiding me on this CSM panel. It was in Texas, and I'm still don't really know what I'm doing, but she coached me through, and Gail Jensen was on the panel, and Kim Nixon Cave, and she just championed me forward with that. So Ronnie, thank you very much. You've done a lot to get me kickstarted in this arena. So it's kind of fun.
Thank you. I have to just interrupt, Kathy, because I have tears in my eyes, which you can't see. And it was my pleasure, Jill, and I was always so honored to know how excited you were about everything. And I really do have tears in my eyes. I appreciate it. You've said.
Thanks.
One thing I've really loved about having these discussions and conversations with all of you over the past several months is how layered all of you are, one on top of another, and how woven your stories are all with each other. So let's continue with Celia.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for including me in this. I'm sorry I missed the CSM gathering, but this is really fun to be a part of. So I was raised in Dallas, Texas, and have been a physical therapist 41 years, 24 as a clinician, 14 as an academic, and 3 as a happily retired PT. But I was raised by devout Catholic parents, and went to 17 years of Catholic school. Yes, you heard that right, 17 years. And I was really immersed in that culture, and that culture was that included the values of service and social justice. So I found an old paper of mine, like from 4th grade, about social justice, and another one about feminism, by the way. But so I decided that I wanted to do international work before I even knew what PT was. And I'm not really sure exactly what my push was, but I think that's what formed me. So at about the age of 15 or 16, I wrote that letter to the Peace Corps back when you couldn't do a Google search and said, what do you need? And they sent me back this little pamphlet that included a line about physical therapists. So I looked it up and learned what physical therapy was a volunteer in a hospital, and really just felt like that was my fit. So, so really my interest in global health came before PT, but once I got my degree at Marquette, I thought I needed to get, 3, 4 years of solid clinical experience before going overseas. So I actually went over to Nepal with with Dooley Foundation, and
Oh, yeah.
landed, again, back before the day of Google and you knew what was going on in the world. I literally landed in a revolution. And so they were shooting in the streets, the phone lines were dead. And so my project that was supposed to be 2 years long, and I'd said all my goodbyes to everyone in the US, ended after 3 months. So I backpacked through Southeast Asia and decided to stop in Hawaii for 3 or 4 days on the way back to the mainland and stayed for 6 years. And Hawaii really gave me it was like all the comforts of the normal US life, but the multicultural experience of living there, I think really had a profound effect on me. The great wealth in the islands and the great poverty in the islands, all the languages. And during that time, I also thought, boy, I need something more besides PT to live in this world. And I went back and got my public health degree from the University of Hawaii at the time with an international health specialization is what it was called. And part of that I had to do 3 months overseas. So I was in Vietnam for 3 months. And during that time, I learned that a group of PTs were coming to do a workshop. And these PTs were from Health Volunteers Overseas, HVO. So that is when I connected with HVO and really for the first time in my career found what I thought was my internationally minded tribe of physical therapists. And I think that really changed my trajectory in terms of being around a lot of really amazing people and really challenged me. No one told me this, but I watched them and I thought, gosh, I think I need a PhD to really fully understand all of this. And I went back and got my PhD. So after I got out of HVO's leadership, I moved into the SIG's leadership, and it's just continued to really build my tribe, which I'm very, very grateful for.
So I
Thanks,
was going to
Celia.
mention later, can I quickly mention something?
Sure.
Just
sure.
that physical therapy overseas, which is part of Health Volunteers Overseas, was started by Betty Kay and me. Betty Kay had a tremendous impetus and worked in Vietnam, particularly. So we did one of the first trips that went to Vietnam. But it was interesting because before it became HVO, Health Volunteers Overseas, it was CARE. And when I went with CARE, because my husband, again, was the hand surgeon, I was the only PT that they had ever had as part of CARE. So then it became sort of, well, like, why don't we have physical therapy overseas? So although HVO now has many subspecialties, PTO was really the second or third subspecialty that they had. And it continues, of course, to be very strong. I had forgotten that part, Celia.
Yeah, and when I met them in '95 in Vietnam, and it was Betty Kay leading the trip, it was still HVO, and we were under orthopedic overseas actually, and it was
Right,
that year when they were splitting into PT overseas.
right, right. And
Well,
then
and that,
I
Man,
think
yeah.
so many
that
layers. Yeah.
came from CARE because they decided to give up CARE and expand and do this much larger health focus, because CARE did a lot of other things, agricultural education, and they called us visiting volunteer specialists, the medical people. Anyway, I had forgotten that part. Yeah, very nice.
Well, I'd like to add something here too. It was after I got my PT degree, I really wanted to go back in the Peace Corps and do PT. But they only had PT positions really for the first maybe 10, 20 years. So by the end of the 70s, there were no PT positions. And part of that is due to the fact that there were plenty of competent and qualified PTs in most of the countries that Peace Corps served. But I don't think that's completely true anymore. But over the years, even after later on in my career, even 10 or 20 years ago, I thought, gee, it would be great to go back again, but they don't have any PT positions, except there are a few academic ones, I think, for short-term periods for developing curricula. The other thing was in 95, I mean, I was anxious to go overseas again, and I think it was Ronnie that directed me to HVO at a PT overseas, because that was in 95 when I went over to Vietnam just for a couple of weeks to teach a PT course.
Right.
And I was very glad that HVO had that program because I, couldn't find another one.
Yeah, in '89 there were positions with the Peace Corps that I had applied for, but things just didn't line up in terms of dates. Malawi was one of them. Antigua, I turned down Antigua because I just pictured myself being on an island with Jimmy Buffett showing up, and that was not my vision of my international work.
I find it hard to believe that they thought there was adequate PT anywhere.
Well, no, I mean, I don't understand that at all, Ronnie. And I've talked to Peace Corps people many times over the years and saying, what, tell me, even at, national conferences and Peace Corps leaders in Washington say, why do you think, well, I think the bottom line is that Peace Corps doesn't go anywhere unless the country invites them. And the United States will go to other countries and survey and see and ask that country what they need in terms of trained assistance. So it's really up to the country to invite volunteers in the areas and fields that they feel they need the most help. So that doesn't necessarily mesh with what we may see as higher level physical therapy practice, but that's basically the way it is. They have to follow what they're invited to.
So that I know I'm going to shut up in a minute for Jenny to continue this conversation, but that brings me back to Jamaica. So Jamaica had a PT school with maybe 15 graduates. Well, they were all in the hospitals, and
Sure.
many went to the States. And
Right.
the children I saw that in rural Jamaica, nobody had a PT, nobody knew rehab, nobody knew anything. I would teach them the most basic things that made such a difference in their life because they had never had any PT or rehab. So,
Right.
country like Jamaica might have said, oh, we have a PT school.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Jenny Audette,
Hi everyone.
all the way from Norway.
Yeah, it's middle of the night in Norway in a poorly lit hotel room. But anyway, um, I live in Portland, Maine, but I would call myself a Rhode Islander. I spent most of my life in Rhode Island. I've been a physical therapist since I graduated from Northeastern University in 1988 with my bachelor's degree. And I wanted to mention that I became an APTA member, though, in 1983, and I've been an APTA member nonstop since 83. So as a student, I joined and have continued that membership all that time, which is kind of fun and scary to think about. I've worked in a variety of settings. I started out as a PT who was interested in pediatrics and neuro, and my first job was at a day treatment program for adolescents with brain injuries, and I loved that. But I pretty much saw the writing on the wall about needing a master's degree. So I went back to school pretty quickly and earned an advanced master's, it was called at the time, at Boston University. And I worked in the public school system in Boston while I was going to school there. Then I moved to Nantucket, where I lived on Nantucket Island
Oh,
off of Cape Cod for about
lucky
3 years.
you.
Yeah, it was good. And I worked in the little hospital there, and I pretty much became a generalist because I did a little acute care, a little outpatient. I treated in the public schools, I treated at home care, and kind of saw whatever there was to be seen. And shortly after that, we moved back to the mainland, and I took a job as the director of rehab at a hospital. And from there, I treated a little on the side at nursing homes on my way home from work and at a hospital on the weekends. But I really moved away from treating patients. And I did that job for about 10 years, which I really loved. And then I went into academia, where I've been now for the past about 22 years. Um, I'm married. I met my husband at a summer camp when we were teenagers. And I have 3 daughters, 2 grandchildren. And this question that we were asked to answer about why we became a PT, I kind of became a PT by chance. I applied to 7 colleges, 7 universities, and only 2 of them were for a physical therapy, and both were in Boston. I determined from that list that I wanted to go to school in Boston, and Northeastern gave me more money than Simmons, so I went to Northeastern and became a PT. But I do sort of believe that somebody knew that's what I was supposed to do, because I think it was the right place for me, and the right discipline for me to go into. And I really think PT is it's been a great career, and I think it's a really good profession. I, like Celia, was into just social justice before I even knew what the words were. Celia wrote her paper and called it that. I'm not sure I knew what social justice, what the name was for what I grew up experiencing and feeling strongly about. But I look back now and think that's really kind of what it was. I grew up in a household where we had refugees living with us all the time from our church. Our church had partnerships in various places, and you never we were always, my brothers and sisters and I were always giving up our rooms to other people to come and live in for a short time. So that I think is sort of the base of things. And my interest in global health probably started with the desire to volunteer internationally. And I did my first volunteer trip in 1994 to China. And then my sort of interest in global health sort of evolved through thinking about service learning, having a strong interest in that, and then leading and organizing student experiences and what was that value of those things. And then, and then my career's just evolved from there. That's all. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jenny.
Sure.
So many stories to hear. So many stories to hear. With the remaining time left, I'm hoping that we can go through again, each of you, and maybe everyone gets 3 or 4 minutes to talk about their roles with the Global Health SIG. Because if it hasn't been pointed out, we have the first, the second, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, well, plus Kai, seventh chairs of our SIG present tonight. And if anyone knows how to get a hold of Helen Masin, who was the chair after Ronnie stepped down, I've been trying and I can't reach her, but she would have been the third chair.
Is it a Florida address?
I actually
Yes,
know
she's
Sherry Hayes, so I'll try to find that out.
yeah, I'd love to get in touch with Helen Masin. So anyway, at the risk of redundancy, Karin Schumacher was the first chair and founded the SIG in 1985. She told us, I heard some of the stories leading up to the founding of the SIG, and Ronnie joined her right away. So they were together running the SIG from 1985 till about 2001. Karin and Ronnie, you want to spend a few minutes talking about how you started everything and the mission, the vision, the newsletters, the dues, the hundreds of letters you wrote back and forth, because of course the days before computer.
Right.
Karin, go ahead. Couple minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you encapsulated it. I would say that I think and Ronnie will probably agree with me. I hope that once we met the first meeting, I had no idea how many people would come, and we were not allowed to advertise it in the program because we weren't officially part of APTA. But in any case, 35 people showed up. And Ronnie, of course, was like the first one that walked in. So we started chatting. She said that she had been interested in the topic for years. So I invited her, let's work together on this. We have the same goal. So we did for the next 15 years. But that night, also, I wanted to tell you that Ruth Wood attended. And I don't know if Sally was busy, but Sally Ellsberg, but Eugene Michaels, who's head of research at APTA and was, on staff there for many years, was there. They came because we had been corresponding by letter for the last year before that. So we were thrilled that there were that many people, and it took off like a rocket after that. I mean, by the following September, we had something like 50 or 75 letters coming in wanting to know what they could do. And so really from that day on, we had an annual meeting at each APTA conference. And we'll go into, and Ronnie will probably go into more, how we became an officially affiliated with APTA in 96. 93, we were casually associated with the community health section, and we were allowed to be on their program at the combined section meeting, which were, in those days, there were 2 meetings a year, the combined section meeting in February and the annual meeting in June. But before I go any further, I do want to take the time to emphasize that this was not just Ronnie and me and Celia and the other early people. It was a teamwork cooperation. I really want to list names for the record of people who contributed significantly to CCIIG during the time that I was most active. And these people could have any number of roles. They could have been an officer with CCIIG. They could have been a presenter at annual conference. I had a group here in Denver of 10 or 15 people who were very supportive with me and helped me put the newsletter together, and then networking people. And I'm just going to mention about a half a dozen names. Warren May, Nancy Prickett from New Jersey, was very active for years. Pat McAdoo from Alaska, Pat Sullivan from Boston, Sandy Gans, Ellen Price from New Jersey, who was active for many years, Selden Wasson, who worked on Indian reservation, Kathy Perry, Helen Masin, Celia Pechak. I've got you down there from way back, Celia. Lori Hack from the Health Policy Administration section, Sherry Clark, Sally Adelsberg, Ruth Wood, Margaret O'Hare, who followed up as the next executive secretary after Elizabeth McKay. And I will say that after we started, we had great support from the WCPT delegates from APTA. Marilyn Moffat, who was president of APTA, was very supportive, as was Jane Matthews, who was president in the late 90s. Ann Gert from WHO was a PT and contributed, and Diane Woods. So I know there are many, many people that I've left out. And if any of you ever talk to people who were part of CCIIG, I want you to pass on my great thanks to all of them. None of this would have happened without many more people than just Ronnie and I. So,
So Karen,
I will say
in
that,
order to Karen, in order to make sure we get everyone's story,
Yeah.
I'm gonna move us along a little bit. So
Good.
I know you and Ronnie worked together for many, many years and a lot of letters back and forth, and you started a newsletter and you started a resource guide. So Ronnie, any
The only thing I would
comments
say, I
about
don't have all
yours?
those notes. That's fabulous, Karen. Just that
Yeah.
I would paint a less rosy picture in terms of trying to get an official recognition by APTA. So we did have to find a home, and that was when we found the health policy section. And Karen is saying CCI SIG, that was the cross-cultural and international special interest group. And somewhere along after that, I think several years after that, the name was changed to Global Health.
Right.
SIG, but
And that's during Jill and Celia's time. So
and
they can tell us that story in a minute.
I would like to mention is that when we were trying to expand our reach, we thought, well, cross-cultural could be people with disabilities, GLBT, and different groups that we were trying to work with. As it turns out, all of those groups now have their own special interest groups, but at the time, especially people with disabilities, because people weren't out as much as they are now if they were lesbian or gay, but people with disabilities, we were trying to really work closely with people who are interested in working with people with disabilities or had their own disability. So those are a couple of points. But then we did join the health policy section, and we were that was when we really became integrated with the APTA.
And
right. There was just
Ronnie
a lot
brought
of
Jill in.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Just weaving this story together. Ronnie brought Jill in. Jill brought Celia in. And I particularly love the story, Jill, you told me about how you two were sugar and spice in your years together.
I know.
Who was sugar and who was spice?
Well, she would say I was sugar and she would say she was spice, and she's the one that gave us that. And yeah, our story really weaves together. I was alongside Helen Masin for 3 years as her vice chair. And if you need to fill in a little bit about Helen, the punchline for her is that she was in leadership when the CAPTI standards came out revised and had cultural competency. I think it was maybe 26 or 12, I can't remember, but the words cultural competency were peppered through that recent version of CAPTI standards, and Helen took that and ran with that. So that's what I think of when I think of those 3 years I was alongside of Helen. She really promoted that. And then she had stepped down, and I stepped into the chair, and Celia stepped into vice chair. And I just really feel like that whole time I was there for 6 years, running alongside with her. And how I best describe it is that Celia, she's a visionary. She has these thoughts and ideas and all of these things, and then she's really good at operationalizing it. And I was the person that was hearing her vision and yes, let's do this. And then I was the one at the table at HPA advocating and selling it and getting the support and the resources behind it. And then we'd come back to the table, and then Celia would be like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're changing the name. We're making an award. We're doing this. We're doing a global health reception. We're getting rid of that Saturday morning breakfast. And so there's a number of different things that happened in that 6 year time period that were just so fun looking back on, and how it happened. The piece that I'll emphasize is that when the HPA, and I remember Ronnie saying we fought hard to figure out which group to be under. And I remember her sharing that with me. And then I remember we're part of them, but we really didn't have a seat at the table. We were just sort of in name there. But I got invited to this retreat in Denver. And so I'm out here at this retreat and thinking, well, I want to be more at the table. I have ideas here too. How do we do this? At that time, we were reworking the strategic plan for HPA, which it was at the time. Rick Gawenda was the president at that time. And we ended up spending days reworking this plan. The APTA had come out with their core values, and one of those core values was social responsibility. And I thought, that's a word that maybe I can get them to rally around. They're not going to get global health and they're not going to get cultural competency, but social responsibility, nobody can argue with that. So here, why don't we need a director of social responsibility, and that will be the chair of the Global Health SIG. And that rolled in. And then while we're at it, TechSig, you guys need a place at the table too. And Dan was my colleague here. And I'm, Dan, let's give you a post here at the board as well. You can be the chair. You can be the director of technology for the and so we kind of embedded a place for the SIGs at the table, which gave us access to resources and programming and all of these different things so that I could come back and say to Celia, all right, they're giving us this. What do you want to do with it? So I'll let Celia take it from there.
Right. Celia, in particular, you told stories about giving us visibility at CSM, programming slots,
Yeah.
social responsibility ribbons.
Yes, I want to just preface this by Jill gives me far more credit than I deserve. It was very synergistic. And then, of course, I have a list of other people I want to name too. But it was a great synergistic team. So I think the social responsibility pillar was absolute key to everything that follows. I just want to highlight that. The other four things that I think really that we did over my time with Jill and with Jenny is we were able to get the global health reception going, which may have been my idea, but it wouldn't have gotten done if we hadn't gotten money. And that was Jill, sweet Jill at the table with the people with the money. And that gave us an opportunity for networking, much more visibility at CSM, particularly with students, to bring young folks in. It was fun. And then it also provided an opportunity to do, eventually, to call it a peer-reviewed poster presentation. So that brought more faculty and students in as well. The other thing is we originally only had 2 programming slots, and those slots were not always consistent how much control we had over those. Those grew tremendously, particularly with the help of Jenny when she was involved with that. So we got much more visibility through our programming. The social responsibility ribbons, this is totally Jill's idea, and Jill made the original ones, where we looked for posters or presentations across all sections and academies and really highlighted that social responsibility was important and it was being done across the APTA. And then the fifth thing I think that was really key is when we really got our priorities and our name connected to the grant program, so that we could get, those of us who were doing global health related research could get could get funded, and I was one of those recipients, and it had a really meaningful impact on my trajectory of gaining tenure and gaining promotions. So I think that was huge. So overall, I think the quality and the amount of what we were able to do at CSM, and I want to highlight early on the presentations were more like what I did last summer with my students, and we really upped the game in terms of asking for data and making it data driven, and sort of increased our value and our presence at APTA. So I'm proud of all that. I just want to throw out some names real quick. Jenny's about to speak, but Jeff Hartman, Aaliyah Chaudhry, April Gamble, Don Magnuson, Aaron Thrush, Cheryl Kerfeld, who's here, Sue Clappis, Sarah Pullen, Nancy Gell, Laura Martell, tons of other people. And I want to highlight the importance of the HPA and Alley board. We had some people who were really, really questioning who we were and why we were there, but we had really important people who advocated for us. And really, we made those huge, huge moments of progress because of Jill's relationship with them and Jenny's relationship with them. They're two powerhouses in terms of being able to influence the board, and I thank them for that.
And that's a nice segue into the last remaining few minutes. Jenny Audette, who has this reputation, as Celia just shared with us, of having excellent and strong relations with the HPA and later the ALI board. So we want to know, what is your secret sauce? And including if you have a couple minutes to tell us about this letter you wrote to Sharon Dunn and Justin Moore.
Sure.
Any other examples of your diplomacy?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that really nice way of introducing me. And to Celia, I think what happened with the board, I wanted to follow up on something Celia said. Not only did we get more spots, the quality and the number of people wanting those spots just went up and up and has continued to go up. So that's a really another important point. When Celia was chair, there were a couple of times that she was unable to attend the meeting that happened every year in Colorado. So I went in her place. And so I had a long relationship with the board because I went in Celia's place a couple of times, and then I had all the times that I got to go as the chair. And I really enjoyed working with those people. And I feel like Jill and Celia had set me up really well to have a seat at the table, to be really a heard member of the board. Not only did I have the director of social justice position that they had created, but also the reputation that Jill and Celia had established across the board with the people on the board. And the change in leadership to Ira Gorman was really, really beneficial to us. And I really enjoyed working with Ira. And so his interest in our interests and our ability to collaborate was really important. And I like working with people who are fun to work with. So they were fun and we got things done. I was involved in the strategic planning process with ALI as it became. I try to be reliable and do what I'm supposed to do. And I think those are the kinds of colleagues that people like to work with and somehow gain some influence. So I think that was a role I tried to play in my position. And what happened was at some point related to this letter to the APTA, there was a CSM, and I think it was in Washington. I can't remember which one it was, but we noticed that were lots of people presenting on global health-ish topics. And it concerned us because we wanted a more unified message. We also noticed that there were SIGs popping up in some of the other sections with similar interests. And so we wrote this letter to APTA on behalf of the SIG that we kind of wanted to upgrade, like Celia described, the quality of the programming related to global health and social justice at CSM. We wanted to advocate for more coordinated efforts by APTA to pull all these different factions that were kind of popping up together. And so we wrote this letter to them. I just reread it. It's a pretty good letter. And it led to me and Sue Klappa and Jeff Hartman and Matt Mezabov, who was the next president of ALI, meeting with Sharon Dunn and Justin Moore in Chicago during, I think it was, I don't know, during a meeting that they were having there. So we were all there. We met with them, and I think that meeting was very. I'm not sure it resulted in a lot, but they definitely heard us, and I think it maybe opened their eyes a little bit. In terms of what the SIG was doing. And I think we're really highly regarded SIG, even though we're just a SIG and not a section. I think they respect us a lot.
Thanks, Jenny.
Sure.
We could talk for another couple of hours. So many stories to tell, but I see that our hour is up and people have things to do and places to go. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. But these 5 women are truly the Global Health SIG OGs. And I think it's been so important to get their stories out to a wider audience. And so glad everyone was able to attend tonight and listen to their stories. Really appreciate your time.
Well, I would like to quick jump in and say much gratitude goes to Kathy Clark, who is basically the director and the producer of this entire project. And I could not have done collecting 3 file drawers and 10 boxes worth of history over 6 months without her supportive encouragement over the months and gentle direction. And I want to thank you very much for that, Kathy. You've done a great job.
It's been my pleasure. It's been such a pleasure communicating with all of you and hearing the stories. Just loved it. Thank you.
I want to echo that thanks. And I also want to respect the timeline, but I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't invite final thoughts from our panelists. And Kathy, I'm going to include you there too. You've been collecting this information, and I wonder if you have a takeaway that you might share with us after we hear from our team. No particular order here. If there's somebody ready to jump in.
I've had 6 replacements, and COVID, of course, hit us all, and my international volunteering seems to have withered, much to my dismay. But there's still so much to do. And Kathy had asked me just to mention that one of the things I've done is sort of adopt an Afghan family that came over during the August 2022, I think it was, time, or 21. In any case, there's still a lot to do. And teaching our peers, I could talk for too long, so I will just say we have to teach our peers as well as educate ourselves about all that needs to be done.
And Ronnie. Oh, thank you for doing that. I think it's fabulous. The people, I have some friends here in Denver who've also adopted. Even though it's not specifically physical therapy work, those kinds of actions and those kinds of service contribute to the body of knowledge that we need to keep spreading on diversity, inclusion, cultural competency, and what one term I learned in public health school was social determinants of health. And we know that it's very good now that in the physical therapy field, we're more aware of that in how it impacts our practice. I just wanted to say there are a lot of important decisions in my life, but the 2 most important decisions in life that brought me the most joy and that were the most rewarding was number 1, no, it's not CCIIG. It was the adoption of my Indian daughter at age 3 in the year 2001. She has brought me immense joy, and she's now 29 and a vet tech and about to go to vet school. The second most important decision I made was to go to physical therapy school and to step out and try to start this group. And those are 2 decisions I will never regret and have made you have a very fulfilling life and career. So thank you to all.
Yeah, I'll pitch in next. I think that we should continue doing what's some of us have been doing all along, and that's trying to write about this stuff and publish this stuff, integrate it into our curriculums, which often this is the topics that get the least attention. And they're, not specifically mapped out by CAPD, and so they get pushed to the side. I'm actually at a week-long climate and health institute with some students, and it's another topic that's exactly related to social justice that is hardly in our curricula at all, that we need to start to also add that in. So really thinking about how to continue kind of pushing all these topics and getting them written about and into curricula so that the students out there have heard about it, and they, once they learn about it, they love this stuff, but it's often not at the top of the priority list in most programs.
I'll add on to Jenny because it's the same kind of vein. And now that I'm in academia and not so much traveling, but right here, helping our students have these experiences with folks that are of different walks of life and different things. And if we can help the next generation really experience and know and develop relationships that they can then further potentially move on. And the second piece, real quickly, is just listening to the evolution. I just love hearing and somebody once said to me, sometimes the perfectionism in me wants to do it all the way right, and I feel bad if it's not right. But we're never all the way right, right? We do the best we can with what we know, and then when we know more, we do better, right? And so, just learning from Ronnie and from Karin, and then stepping in, and then hearing what's been going on with Jenny, and knowing some of what's been going on with Kai. It's so neat to see how this keeps burgeoning and growing and getting further outreach. And so everybody's adding in along the way, and I just can't wait to see what happens as that continues, even with some of the folks that are going to soon to step into leadership that are potentially on this call. It's just going to be neat to see how it traverses.
Yeah.
And actually, I was going to say almost exactly what Jill said in terms of the evolution of our group and the evolution of global health and our connectedness to it, and the importance of bringing in new graduates, young people, diverse ideas, diverse approaches to it. I think that there's just a tendency that was one thing I was a vice chair for 6 years and then the chair, and I told him I'm only going to do one because we need to keep moving people through. We need new ideas, new energy. And so I saw that there's this, at least was a student in the call, maybe they're still here, from University of Washington. Like, you are not too inexperienced or too young to not already being in leadership, right? There's something you can do, and you can start to make changes right now. You don't have to wait for 20 years of experience. So let's keep bringing young people and mentoring folks into this space.
And I would just like to invite anybody that's coming through Denver, either, wherever, call me. I'd love to get together for coffee or a beer. I'd even go out to the airport if you're coming through on a transfer. It'd just be really fun to get together. So I'm retired. I have time to do that.
Do you finish going through your boxes, Karin?
Um, you would have to ask that, wouldn't you, Kathy? I do have, yeah, I have one box left. I have a stack of about 2 feet high that I've gone through already twice, but I have to go through one more time to chuck out what's not important. And Kathy has been advising me the criteria to make that decision. And then I'm going to be sending the last final. Some of that is correspondence with Ronnie and with other organizations that really wanted to know about us and be part of us in the early years. So I have letters from that. So that, and Kathy thought it would be a good idea also to send the name of our member list from late 80s, early 90s. Probably most of those people have retired, but we're going to put it into the history. So I will be we'll talk, Kathy, again. I'm going to be sending those to you very soon.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
So as we wrap things up, Cheryl was holding up the actual archival document there. If you can see super thick binder, which is also a bit of a relic, right? A binder. Do they do
Oh,
those?
really? Yeah.
Everything's digital now, so it's really
Well, and
cool to be able
remember,
to have that in hand.
every single newsletter from 1990 to 95, 3 times a year is in there, and
Amazing.
articles from many of you, and it's fun to look through.
That's
Yeah,
amazing. Thank you all for
Great.
being here. Kathy, thank you so much,
My
especially for
pleasure.
We look
being
forward to the
Jenny,
50th
you as well
anniversary.
abroad. Everyone, have a great evening, morning,
Thanks so
sleep,
much.
wherever
thank
you
you.
are.
Yeah,
Thank
See
you.
you
great.
next time.
Thanks to
Bye bye.
everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.